The bar on Zoran thus was a riot of color, noise, and motion. Beings of all shapes and sizes crowded together under the shifting neon lights, their conversations forming a steady hum broken by bursts of alien laughter, sharp exclamations, and occasional hissing arguments. Jack shouldered his way through the throng, his eyes scanning the room for a place to sit. His friend and fellow human, Theo, trailed just behind him, brushing off a clawed hand that accidentally grazed his shoulder. "This place is packed," Theo muttered. "I told you we should have found a quieter spot." Jack grinned over his shoulder. "And miss all the fun? Come on. The best stories happen in joints like this." The two finally spotted an empty table near the bar. Jack flopped down into one chair while Theo slid into the other, glancing warily at a multi-eyed reptilian creature hunched over a drink at the next table. "So what now? We just sit here and hope something interesting happens." "Relax, man. Just soak it in," Jack said, leaning back. He scanned the crowd again, his gaze lingering on a trio of humanoid aliens chatting in rapid, melodic tones. One of them, a woman with shimmering violet skin and hair like spun silver, caught his eye and smiled briefly before turning back to her companions. "See that?" Jack nudged Theo. "You're not going to get that kind of reception at a quiet little dive." Theo raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here for the reception. I'm here because you dragged me along." Before Jack could retort, the bar's main doors swung open, and a towering figure ducked under the frame to enter. The room seemed to shift subtly, conversations quieting as the newcomer strode inside. He was massive, with broad shoulders and a jagged crest running down the back of his head. His armor gleamed under the neon light, and his forearms moved with a confidence that immediately commanded attention. It was Grolar, the alien warlord. Jack nudged Theo again. "Now that's interesting." Theo followed Jack's gaze and frowned. "Are you kidding me? That's Grolar. The guy's trouble. You know what they say about him, right? He doesn't walk into bars for a drink. He walks in to find his next challenge." "Then we'll just keep our heads down," Jack said, though he couldn't quite look away. No need to draw attention. But Grolar's piercing eyes swept the room and landed directly on them. For a moment, Jack thought maybe it was just a coincidence. Then Grolar began to stride in their direction. Theo stiffened. "This is not keeping our heads down, Jack." Jack forced a grin. "Relax. We're just two regular guys having a drink. No reason he'd single us out." But Grolar stopped at their table, towering over them. The warlord's voice was deep and resonant, cutting through the bar's din. "I have been seeking a challenge, and I believe I've found it." Jack swallowed, the smile fading from his face. "Look, I think you've got the wrong table." Grolar ignored him, turning instead to Theo. "Do you accept, human?" Theo blinked, glancing at Jack. "Accept what? We just got here." "Silence," Grolar said, his tone brooking no argument. "A challenge of Xanther. I have been undefeated for over a decade. Few have the courage to face me, and even fewer the skill to match me." Jack glanced at Theo, who looked ready to bolt. "We're just here for a drink," Jack said quickly. "We're not, prepared for a game." Grolar's eyes narrowed. "A game? This is no mere game. Xanther is a test of wit, strategy, and nerve. Refuse, and you show yourselves as cowards." Theo leaned closer to Jack, whispering, "We don't even know how to play." Jack whispered back, "How hard can it be? I mean, we've handled worse, right?" "Not from him," Theo shot back. Jack straightened in his chair. "We appreciate the offer, but we're just two humans looking to enjoy the evening. Maybe another time." Grolar leaned closer, his forearms folding menacingly. "Humans are known for their arrogance, yet also their adaptability. If you truly believe yourselves worthy of sitting in my presence, then prove it. Play Xanther." Jack held up his hands. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't even know the rules." The warlord smirked. "I will teach you as we play." Theo groaned under his breath. "Great. This is how we die." Despite Theo's protests, Jack nodded slowly. "Fine. If it's just a game, we'll give it a shot. But don't expect much." Grolar's grin was sharp, almost predatory. Excellent. Let us begin. As the bar patrons watched with a mix of curiosity and amusement, Grolar pulled a small, intricately carved board from his armor. He set it on the table with a flourish, the pieces gleaming under the neon lights. Theo looked like he was about to faint, but Jack rolled up his sleeves, leaned forward and said, "All right, teach us." Chapter 2. The Unexpected Challenge. The board of Xanther shimmered under the lights of the bar, each piece carved from materials that seemed otherworldly. Jack studied them, his brow furrowed. The pieces looked like a mix between holograms and physical objects, shifting slightly when he moved his head. Theo sat across from him, arms crossed, looking less than thrilled about the situation. "You're sure about this?" Theo muttered. "This isn't some friendly game of chess." Jack gave him a small grin. "How hard can it be?" He said he'd explain the rules. "Yeah, but if we lose, we could end up being made an example of." Theo glanced at the looming figure of Grolar, who had seated himself at the head of the table. The alien warlord's 4 arms moved deftly, arranging the game pieces into their starting positions. His piercing eyes darted between Jack and Theo, his expression unreadable. "Relax," Jack said, leaning back. "This isn't life or death. It's just a game." "You're awfully calm for someone who's never seen this thing before," Theo replied. "What if he cheats? Then we'll cheat back." Grolar's deep, resonant voice cut through their conversation. "The rules are simple, humans. You each control a fleet represented by these pieces. The goal is to maneuver your fleet to capture my flagship while protecting your own. Each piece has its own movement patterns, and there are hidden cards that alter the battlefield. Choose your strategy wisely, or you will find yourselves overwhelmed." Jack nodded slowly. "All right, we can handle that." Theo leaned in, his voice low. "You know we can't actually handle that. Just keep an eye on the cards and tell me if you notice anything shady," Jack whispered back. "I'll focus on moving the fleet. And when it all falls apart, we improvise, like we always do." Grolar placed a set of glowing cards on the table. "Humans," he said, gesturing to the cards. "Draw your starting hand." Jack and Theo exchanged a glance. Sure," Jack said, reaching for a card. Theo hesitated, then followed suit. The cards were cool to the touch, and as Jack turned his over, he saw intricate symbols etched into the surface. They seemed to shift and shimmer, never quite staying still. Jack frowned, trying to make sense of the symbols. "You may use these cards at any point," Grolar explained. "Some will boost your fleet's abilities. Others will cripple your opponents. Choose carefully when to play them." Jack nodded again, glancing at Theo's cards. Theo just shrugged, clearly out of his depth. "Your move," Grolar said, sitting back and folding his lower arms while his upper arms rested on the table. Jack and Theo exchanged another look. Then Jack reached for one of the fleet pieces. He moved it a few spaces, mimicking the pattern he'd seen Grolar demonstrate earlier. The piece shifted slightly, almost as if responding to his touch. He felt a faint pulse in his fingers as it settled into its new position. Grolar moved next, his piece gliding smoothly across the board. He played a card, and one of his fleet ships split into 2 smaller pieces. "Divide and conquer," Grolar said, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "Your turn." Theo leaned in, whispering, "This is bad. We've got no idea what those cards even do." Jack kept his eyes on the board. "We'll figure it out. Watch what he does and follow his lead." "That's your plan. Unless you've got a better one." Theo groaned and moved one of his pieces. "This is not going to end well." As the game progressed, Jack and Theo started to get the hang of it. Grolar was relentless, his moves calculated and aggressive, but Jack noticed something. Whenever they played a certain type of card, Grolar's movements became slightly more hesitant. He didn't comment on it, but Jack filed it away for later. "Play that card," Jack said softly, nudging Theo. "Why? It doesn't even say what it does. Just trust me." Theo sighed and placed the card on the table. The effect was immediate. One of Grolar's pieces froze in place, unable to move for the next turn. Growler's eyes narrowed slightly, and Jack allowed himself a small grin. See? We're not completely lost, Jack said, moving another piece into position. That was pure luck, Theo muttered, but he looked a little less tense. The game dragged on, each move growing more complex. Jack and Theo started to work together, whispering strategies and pointing out potential traps. Growlar watched them carefully, his expression unreadable, but Jack could tell they were getting under his skin. The Warlord's moves became sharper, more aggressive. He played 2 cards in rapid succession, wiping out one of their smaller ships and forcing another back to the starting position. Okay, that's not good, Theo said, his voice tight. Stay calm, Jack said. We're still in this. Just don't lose focus. You mean don't panic? Same thing. They pressed on, their movements more coordinated now. Jack let Theo handle the cards while he concentrated on the board. Growlar continued to apply pressure, but the 2 humans adapted quickly. Every time it seemed they were cornered, they found a way out. Growler's eyes narrowed further, and Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. They might not know all the rules, but they were holding their own. By the time they reached the endgame, the bar's patrons had begun to gather around, watching the match with interest. Jack and Theo ignored the crowd, their focus entirely on the board. Jack played their last card, and one of their ships slipped past Growler's defenses, landing a critical hit on his flagship. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Growlar leaned back, his expression unreadable. Well played, the Warlord said finally. His voice carried no anger, only a grudging respect. Jack exhaled a long breath. Thanks. It was intense. Theo slumped in his chair. Intense? That's one way to put it. Growlar rose to his feet, towering over them. You have proven yourselves worthy of my time. Few have challenged me so fiercely. Perhaps I underestimated you humans. Jack smiled weakly. Maybe. Or maybe we just got lucky. Growler's lips curved in a small, dangerous smile. Luck only gets you so far. Until we meet again, humans. And with that, the Warlord turned and strode out of the bar, leaving Jack and Theo to exchange a relieved glance. Well, Theo said, running a hand through his hair. That was something. Jack grinned. Told you it'd be interesting. Chapter 3. An Unlikely Ally. As soon as Growlar left the bar, the tension in the room eased. Conversations picked up, laughter returned, and the alien patrons went back to their drinks. Jack and Theo sat in silence for a moment, staring at the Xanther board still laid out on the table. Theo finally broke the quiet. What the hell just happened? Jack shrugged, leaning back in his chair. I think we just beat a galactic warlord at his own game. Yeah. But why do I feel like we just stepped into something we don't understand? Theo glanced around nervously. People were watching Jack, and not just for the entertainment. Before Jack could respond, the woman they'd noticed earlier, the one with violet skin and hair that shimmered like spun silver, approached their table. She moved gracefully, her long robes swishing as she walked. When she reached them, she offered a small, enigmatic smile. You're not from around here, she said, her voice melodic, with a hint of an accent Jack couldn't place. Was it that obvious? Jack replied, trying to sound casual. You don't see many humans on Zoran thus, she said, pulling up a chair without waiting for an invitation. She settled into it and leaned forward slightly. My name is Lyria. I couldn't help but notice your match with Growlar. Match might be a generous term, Theo said. We were just trying not to get humiliated. And yet you won, Lyria said, her golden eyes narrowing in curiosity. That's no small feat. Jack tilted his head. You sound like you know him. I've had dealings with him, she admitted, her expression guarded. Growlar isn't just a skilled Xanther player. He's a powerful figure, and not one to cross lightly. The fact that you bested him means you've caught his attention. Theo groaned, rubbing his temples. Great, that's exactly what we didn't want. Lyria ignored Theo's grumbling and focused on Jack. What brought you to Zoran thus in the first place? This isn't exactly a tourist destination. Jack hesitated. He wasn't sure how much he should share, but Lyria's gaze was steady, and something about her demeanor put him at ease. We're just traveling, he said carefully. Seeing the galaxy, experiencing new things. We ended up here because we heard it was an interesting spot. Lyria raised a delicate eyebrow. Interesting, indeed, but you should be careful. Grolar isn't one to let a slight go unanswered. Wait, Theo said, sitting up. Are you saying he's going to come after us? Not immediately, Lyria said. But he's a prideful being. He may look for a way to even the score. If I were you, I'd stay alert. Jack leaned forward. Why are you telling us this? She hesitated, as if weighing her words. Let's just say I have my reasons. Grolar's influence isn't something I agree with. He's used his power to dominate this region for too long. When I saw you stand up to him, unintentionally or not, it gave me a sliver of hope that maybe his grip isn't as unshakable as he thinks. Jack exchanged a look with Theo. So, what's your angle here? You want us to take him down? No, Lyria said firmly. That's not something I would ask of you. I merely wanted to warn you. However, if you're interested, I may have information that could help you avoid future confrontations with him. Theo crossed his arms. Sounds like you want something in return. Lyria smiled faintly. Not everything is a transaction. But if you choose to stand against him again, it would benefit others in this region, not just me. For now, I'll leave it at that. Jack considered her offer. She seemed genuine, though he couldn't fully read her intentions. Still, she clearly knew more about Grolar and this world than they did, and if there was even a chance she could help them avoid trouble, it was worth hearing her out. All right, Jack said. We'll listen. What do you know about Grolar's next move? Lyria's eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and approval. It's no secret that he's been searching for something. An artifact of great value, one that could solidify his control over this sector. I don't know all the details, but I've heard whispers that he's close to finding it. If he succeeds, well, let's just say things will become much more difficult for anyone who opposes him. Jack frowned. And you think we can do something about it? Not alone, Lyria admitted. But with the right allies and a solid plan, it's possible to keep that artifact out of his hands. Theo shook his head. This is starting to sound way above our pay grade. It might be, Jack said slowly. But if we just sit back and do nothing, Grolar's not going to leave us alone. At least this way we have a chance to level the playing field. Lyria nodded. You're starting to understand. It won't be easy, but if you're willing to stand up to him again, I'll do what I can to help. Jack glanced at Theo, who looked decidedly uneasy. What do you think? He asked. Theo sighed heavily. I think we're getting in way over our heads. But if you're set on this, I'll back you up. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Jack gave him a small grin. What's the worst that could happen? Theo rolled his eyes. Why do you always have to say that? Lyria's lips twitched in amusement. Then it's settled. I'll share what I know and help you prepare. But tread carefully. Grolar is not a foe to take lightly. As the three of them began to discuss their next steps, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he and Theo were about to embark on a journey they weren't entirely ready for. Chapter 4: Bonds Beyond Worlds. The low hum of Zorantha's twin moons filled the quiet night as Jack, Theo, and Lyria walked along a ridge overlooking the glowing city below. The air carried a slight chill, and the faint scent of alien flora was unlike anything Jack had ever known. Lyria led the way, her flowing robes catching the faint breeze, while Theo trailed behind, still skeptical about their new ally. So, Theo said, breaking the silence, what exactly are we walking into? A meeting, Lyria replied, her voice calm. A trusted contact of mine might have information about Grolar's artifact. If we can confirm its location, we can prevent him from getting it. Jack glanced at Theo, who was clearly uncomfortable. We don't even know what this thing looks like, Theo said. How do we know we'll recognize it when we find it? Lyria stopped and turned to face them. It's known as the Ashalan Sphere, a relic from an ancient civilization that once ruled this sector. It's said to grant the one who possesses it control over vast energy fields, enough to secure dominance over any planet. Trust me, when you see it, you'll know. Theo crossed his arms. Sure. No pressure. Lyria smiled faintly and continued walking. Jack caught up to her, falling into step beside her. You've been against Growlar for a while, haven't you? He asked. Her golden eyes flicked toward him. Long enough to know his weaknesses. Jack tilted his head. And yet you're helping a couple of strangers like us. Why? Lyria hesitated before answering. Because I see potential in you. Growlar thrives on fear. You too, whether you realize it or not, have already begun to break that cycle. The fact that you faced him in the bar and walked away victorious speaks volumes. Sure, but that was just a game, Jack said. This is something else entirely. Lyria's gaze softened. Sometimes a small act is all it takes to set larger events in motion. You're here now, aren't you? Jack glanced back at Theo, who was muttering something under his breath, and nodded. Yeah, we're here. They reached a quiet courtyard surrounded by tall, flowering trees. Lyria gestured for them to wait as she stepped forward and activated a small device on her wrist. A shimmering hologram appeared in front of her. A feline-like alien with sleek, jet-black fur and piercing green eyes. Lyria, the hologram said, its voice smooth and accented. You bring company. How bold. They're trustworthy, Lyria replied. We need information on the Ash Allen sphere. The hologram tilted its head. And what makes you think I have that information? Because you always know where the sphere is, Lyria said simply. And you've always wanted to keep it out of Growler's hands. The feline alien let OU. The sphere is, but in return, I need something from you. Here we go, Theo muttered. What is it? Jack asked. There's a data crystal currently locked in a vault within the central government archives of this city. I need it retrieved quietly. Bring it to me, and I'll give you the coordinates of the sphere. Jack glanced at Lyria. Is this for real? Lyria gave a slight nod. It's real, and the archives won't be easy to infiltrate. But if we succeed, we'll have the information we need. Theo rubbed his temples. So now we're thieves? It's a retrieval mission, Jack said. Not theft. Theo threw up his hands. Sure, because that sounds better. Jack turned back to the hologram. Fine, we'll get the crystal. But you'd better hold up your end of the deal. The alien smiled slyly. Oh, I always keep my word. Good luck, humans. And be careful, the archives are well guarded. The hologram faded, and Lyria stepped back toward them. This won't be easy, but we have the element of surprise. Great, Theo muttered. Just what I wanted. An exciting break-in to cap off our lovely evening. Jack patted his shoulder. Come on, Theo. Where's your sense of adventure? Theo gave him a dry look. I left it back on Earth. Lyria couldn't help but smile. If it's any consolation, the archives are beautiful at night. Yeah, that's what I was worried about, Theo said. The view. They started back toward the city, the soft glow of Zarantha's skyline growing brighter as they descended the ridge. Jack walked beside Lyria, the two of them exchanging occasional glances. Despite the tension of their situation, he felt an odd sense of ease in her presence. She moved with quiet confidence, her eyes scanning their surroundings, as if she could see threats before they even appeared. Are you always this calm? He asked her. She looked at him, one corner of her mouth lifting in a faint smile. Not always, but I've learned to keep my composure. It's the best way to stay one step ahead. Jack nodded. Makes sense. Maybe I should take a page from your book. Lyria's smile widened. I think you're doing fine. You've got a certain charm when you're not challenging warlords, that is. Jack laughed. I'll keep that in mind. Ahead, Theo grumbled. If you two are done flirting, we've got a heist to plan. Lyria's cheeks darkened slightly, and she turned her gaze back to the city. Jack chuckled and quickened his pace to catch up to Theo. What's the plan, then? Theo sighed. The plan is not getting caught. Beyond that, we'll figure it out. Great, Jack said, clapping him on the back. Sounds like a solid start. Chapter 5, the plot unfolds. The central archives loomed ahead, an enormous structure of gleaming obsidian and curved spires that reflected the light of Xeranthus' twin moons. Jack, Theo, and Lyria stood a safe distance away, tucked into the shadows of a narrow alley. The air buzzed faintly with the hum of energy shields surrounding the building. "So, how do we get in?" Theo whispered, frowning up at the intimidating structure. "Looks pretty secure to me." Lyria pulled a small device from her robe, a sleek, palm-sized pad with glowing blue lines that pulsed faintly. "The energy shield has a weakness on the west side, a maintenance access point that's not as heavily guarded. If we time it right, we can slip through before the shield cycles back to full strength." Theo raised an eyebrow. "If we time it right? That doesn't sound very reassuring." Jack smirked. "What's the matter, Theo? I thought you liked a challenge." "I like challenges," Theo replied. "I don't like suicide missions." "It's not a suicide mission," Lyria said firmly. "I've done this before. Trust me." Theo groaned. "Great. I feel so much better now." Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, we've got this. We've handled worse, right? Name one time we've handled worse." Remember that time on that mining colony? With the security drones?" Theo narrowed his eyes. "Yeah, we barely made it out alive. And we'll make it out of this one alive too," Jack said confidently. "Let's move." Lyria led the way, moving swiftly and silently toward the west side of the building. Jack and Theo followed close behind, keeping to the shadows. The closer they got, the more imposing the archives appeared. The energy shield shimmered faintly in the air, a translucent barrier that seemed almost alive. Lyria stopped just short of the shield's edge, glancing at her device. "Wait for it," she murmured. Jack and Theo crouched beside her, their breaths shallow as they watched a pair of robotic guards march by on the other side of the barrier. The guards' glowing eyes scanned the area, but they didn't seem to notice the trio hidden just out of sight. "Now," Lyria said, rising to her feet. She moved swiftly through the shield's weak point, the others following closely behind. The moment they were through, the shield shimmered and solidified again, trapping them on the other side. Theo muttered under his breath, but Jack nudged him and gave a reassuring grin. Inside the archive's perimeter, the three crouched behind a row of large, alien sculptures. Lyria pulled up a holographic map on her device. "The data crystal is stored in the lower vault. We'll need to bypass the security panels to reach it." "Bypass?" Theo said, raising an eyebrow. "You mean hack, right?" "Call it what you like," Lyria replied, not looking up. "I've already prepared the codes. Just stay close and let me handle it." Jack nudged Theo. "See? She's got it under control." "I'll believe that when we're back outside," Theo muttered. The group moved cautiously through the archives, avoiding the patrolling guards and weaving through the labyrinthine halls. The interior was as impressive as the exterior: massive, arched ceilings, walls lined with glowing shelves holding artifacts, and a faint, mechanical hum that seemed to emanate from the building itself. As they neared the vault, Lyria held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. She motioned toward a sleek security panel embedded in the wall. "Give me a moment," she said, pulling out a small toolkit. Jack and Theo stood guard, their eyes scanning the area. Jack kept his voice low. "What's the deal with this data crystal, anyway? Why's that cat-like alien so eager to get it?" "No idea," Theo replied. "And honestly, I don't care. I just want to get out of here." Jack leaned in a little closer. "You think we can trust Lyria?" Theo hesitated, then shrugged. "She seems legit, but I wouldn't bet my life on it." Jack glanced at her as she worked on the panel, her movements quick and precise. "I don't think she'd have brought us here if she wasn't serious." "Yeah, well, we've been wrong before," Theo muttered. Before Jack could respond, Lyria straightened. "Got it. The door should open now." As she spoke, the vault door hissed and slid open, revealing a small chamber beyond. In the center of the room, suspended in a column of light, was the data crystal. It was no larger than a human fist, its surface smooth and gleaming with a faint, inner glow. "That's it," Theo said, raising an eyebrow. "That's what we're risking our necks for?" "Don't let its size fool you," Lyria said. "It contains information that could shift the balance of power in this region. Let's get it and go." Jack nodded and stepped inside, carefully reaching out to take the crystal. As soon as he touched it, the light around it flickered and went out. The room fell silent for a moment before a sharp, mechanical alarm began to blare. Guys," Jack said, backing toward the door. "I think we tripped something." Theo groaned. "You think?" "Let's move," Lyria said, already running back the way they came. The trio sprinted through the halls, the alarm growing louder with each step. The robotic guards were no longer patrolling at random. They were converging on their location. Jack and Theo followed Lyria's lead, their footsteps echoing through the vast corridors. Back through the west shield point, Lyria shouted, "It'll be our only way out." Theo panted as he ran. "You mean the shield that just cycled back on?" "Fantastic." Jack managed a grin even as they ran. "Come on, Theo. A little excitement's good for the soul." Theo shot him a glare. "Tell that to my pounding heart." They reached the shield's edge just as the guards rounded the corner behind them. Lyria held up her device and entered a command. The shield flickered again, creating a brief window. "Now!" she shouted. The three dove through the gap just before the shield stabilized. The guards halted at the barrier, their weapons clanging harmlessly against it. Breathing hard, the trio scrambled to their feet and sprinted back into the city's shadows. Once they were a safe distance away, they stopped to catch their breath. Jack looked at the crystal in his hand, then at Theo and Lyria. "Well," he said, "that was fun." Theo gave him a withering look. "You and I have very different definitions of fun." Chapter 6: Close Encounters of the Strategic Kind. The group returned to the safe house Lyria had arranged, a small, nondescript apartment on the edge of the city. The dimly lit space was sparsely furnished, with a couple of mismatched chairs and a low table strewn with maps, data pads, and various tools. Theo collapsed into one of the chairs, running a hand through his hair. "I don't care what anyone says," he muttered. "That was too close. We're lucky we're not in a holding cell right now." Jack placed the recovered data crystal on the table and glanced at Theo. "Relax. We made it out, didn't we?" "Barely," Theo said. "And what do we even have to show for it? A shiny rock that some shady alien thinks is valuable." "It's not just a shiny rock," Lyria said, sitting down across from them. "The information inside it could be the key to finding the Ashallan sphere. If we can use it to stay one step ahead of Grolar, we'll be able to keep it out of his hands." Theo sighed. "I hope you're right, because so far, all I see is us getting deeper into trouble." Jack leaned back, crossing his arms. "What's the next step, Lyria? You said this crystal would help us find the sphere. How?" Lyria picked up a small device from the table and inserted the crystal into a slot. The device hummed softly, and a series of glowing symbols appeared in the air above it. She studied the symbols for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "The crystal contains coordinates," she said. "It's pointing to a remote location on the planet's northern continent. According to what I've learned, the sphere is hidden in a long-abandoned Ashallan temple. If we move quickly, we can get there before Grolar does." Theo raised a hand. "Hold on. A temple? With traps and guardians and who knows what else?" Lyria nodded. "It won't be easy, but it's our best shot at finding the sphere first." Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "All right, so we gear up, head out, and see what we're dealing with. Theo, you're good with tech. Can you rig something up to help us deal with any traps?" Theo shot him a look. "You mean the same traps that might kill us?" Jack grinned. "Yeah, those. You're resourceful. I'm sure you can come up with something." Theo groaned. "Fine. But if I end up face to face with some ancient Ashallan death machine, I'm blaming you." Lyria's lips quirked in a small smile. "I have some equipment that might help. It's not much, but it should give us an edge." Jack nodded. "Perfect. The sooner we're prepared, the sooner we can get moving." The three of them spent the next hour gathering supplies. Lyria showed them a stash of tools, scanners, portable shields, and a compact energy cutter that had clearly been collected over years of dealing with dangerous situations. Theo took the scanner and began calibrating it, muttering under his breath about ancient alien tech. Jack examined the energy cutter, testing its weight in his hand. "This thing's pretty handy," Jack said. "Where'd you get it?" Lyria gave a nonchalant shrug. "I've been in a few tight spots. You pick things up along the way." "Sounds like you've had an interesting life," Jack said, glancing at her. "I'm starting to think you've done more than just oppose Grolar." She met his gaze, her golden eyes steady. "Let's just say I've learned how to survive in a galaxy that's not always kind." Theo looked up from the scanner. "And now you're dragging us into your survival routine." Lyria's expression softened slightly. "You're not being dragged. You chose to be here." Theo rolled his eyes. "Sure. Because we just couldn't resist the chance to go tomb raiding for a mysterious sphere." Jack grinned. "You'll thank us when we pull it off." Theo groaned. "I'll thank you when I'm back on Earth, not dodging killer traps." As they finalized their preparations, a comfortable rhythm began to develop. Jack and Theo worked side by side, arguing about the best way to rig a makeshift sensor array, while Lyria offered quiet suggestions and double-checked their gear. By the time they were ready to leave, the safe house felt less like a hiding spot and more like a base of operations. Jack hefted the bag of equipment onto his shoulder and glanced at Theo. "Ready," Theo sighed. "As ready as I'll ever be." Lyria opened the door, glancing over her shoulder. "Then let's go. We've got a long journey ahead." They stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights fading behind them as they made their way toward the northern continent. It was clear that the path ahead would be treacherous, but for the first time since arriving on Zoran thus, they felt like a team, each of them bringing something vital to the mission. Theo grumbled as they walked. "You know, if we survive this, I'm going to need a long vacation." Jack laughed. "We'll plan it when we're done. Maybe a quiet beach planet somewhere." "Sounds good," Theo said, though his tone was still skeptical. "But let's focus on not getting killed first." Lyria's voice was calm as she glanced back at them. "Stay alert. We're not the only ones who know about the sphere." Jack gave her a confident nod. "We'll be ready." As the three of them pressed onward into the night, their steps steady and their resolve firm, it was clear that they were far from ordinary travelers. They were three individuals, each with their own strengths and doubts, united by a common goal. And for the first time, Jack felt like they might actually have a shot at pulling this off. Chapter 7. In the Heart of Danger. The entrance to the Ashalan Temple loomed before them, carved into a rocky hillside that jutted out of the planet's northern wasteland. The intricate, ancient stonework was still visible even after countless years of weathering, its swirling patterns glowing faintly under the pale light of Zorantha's twin moons. Jack, Theo, and Lyria approached the opening cautiously, their gear strapped tight and their nerves on edge. The temperature had dropped as they ascended into the mountains, and Jack could see his breath misting in the cold air. He glanced at Lyria, who held up a hand to halt their progress. She crouched near the entrance, studying the alien symbols etched into the stone archway. "Is it safe?" Theo asked, his voice low. He was already scanning the area with his portable device, its small screen lighting up with data streams. "Safe enough," Lyria murmured. "But there's definitely some sort of energy field here. It's subtle, but I can feel it." "Great," Theo muttered. "Subtle ancient alien traps. That's just what I wanted." Jack smirked, clapping Theo on the shoulder. "Relax. That's what we brought you for, right? If anything starts humming or glowing, you're the guy to figure it out." Theo gave him a flat look. "Comforting." Lyria adjusted the straps on her pack and stood. "Stay close. If you see anything that looks out of place, don't touch it." Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness of the temple's interior. "Sure. Don't touch the weird stuff." "Got it." Together, they stepped into the shadows of the temple. The air was colder inside, the faint hum of the energy field growing louder. As their eyes adjusted, The dim light from Lyria's handheld device revealed towering columns that rose into darkness, their surfaces covered in intricate carvings. Jack whistled softly. This place is incredible. How old is it? Older than most civilizations still standing, Lyria replied. The Ashalan were advanced. They built these temples to last. Theo was already frowning at a glowing panel set into one of the walls. Okay, this is definitely some kind of control interface. Looks like it's still active. Can you disable it? Jack asked. Maybe. Give me a second. Theo knelt and began fiddling with his tools, muttering under his breath. Of course, the ancient aliens couldn't use a simple switch. No, they had to make it a whole puzzle. Jack grinned and turned to Lyria. Is he always like this? She smirked faintly. From what I've seen, yes. Hey, Theo said without looking up. Some of us are busy saving your butts, you know? As Theo worked, Jack kept watch, scanning the vast chamber. The carvings seemed to shift subtly in the flickering light, and every now and then, he thought he heard faint whispers echoing through the space. He shook his head, telling himself it was just the wind. After a few tense minutes, Theo let out a small, triumphant sound. Got it. The panel's disabled. Shouldn't trigger any nasty surprises now. Nice work, Jack said. Let's keep moving. They ventured deeper into the temple, the air growing heavier with each step. The floor sloped downward, leading them into a massive circular chamber. In the center of the room stood a raised platform, and on that platform sat a pedestal. The object on top of the pedestal shimmered faintly, a sphere, about the size of a grapefruit, glowing with an inner light. That's it, Lyria said, her voice low. The Ashalan sphere. Jack moved closer, but Lyria stopped him with a hand on his arm. Wait, we don't know what kind of defense mechanisms are in place. Theo sighed. Sure. I'll just figure out the advanced alien security system while you two stand around looking heroic. He approached the platform cautiously, his scanner beeping faintly. There's definitely something here, a field around the sphere. If we break it the wrong way, we could set off every trap in the place. Jack crossed his arms. So what's the right way? Theo rolled his eyes. Give me a minute to figure that out. As Theo worked, Jack stood beside Lyria, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of the small blade he carried. You think this thing is really as powerful as they say? Lyria nodded. If Grolar gets it, he'll have the ability to crush any opposition. It's more than just a weapon. It's a tool of domination. Jack glanced at her, studying her expression. And if we take it, what happens then? Her gaze was steady. Then it becomes a responsibility, one we can't afford to ignore. Jack nodded, turning his attention back to Theo, who was still muttering to himself. How's it coming? Almost there, Theo said. I think I've got a way to neutralize the field without triggering anything. Just give me a second. The tension in the chamber was palpable. Jack felt a bead of sweat run down his temple despite the cold air. He kept his hand near his blade, his eyes darting between the shadows and the glowing sphere. Lyria stood calm and focused, her presence steadying him. Finally, Theo straightened. Okay, He platformed and carefully reached out to the sphere. The moment his fingers touched it, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the carvings on the walls began to glow. Guys? Theo said, his voice rising in pitch. I think we triggered something. Back to the entrance, Lyria ordered. Jack clutched the sphere and leapt down from the platform, following Lyria as she bolted for the exit. Theo stumbled behind them, cursing under his breath. The temple walls trembled, the glowing carvings lighting their path as they ran. When they burst out into the open air, the rumbling stopped. The three of them stood there, panting, as the dust settled around them. Jack looked down at the sphere in his hands, its glow now steady and calm. That, Theo said, doubling over to catch his breath, was insane. Jack smiled. But we got what we came for. Lyria stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the sphere. And now the real challenge begins. Chapter 8: Triumph and Togetherness. The ancient Ashalan sphere sat on the table between them, its soft glow illuminating the dim room. Jack, Theo, and Lyria gathered around, their faces a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Outside, the sounds of Zorantha's bustling streets provided a constant reminder that time was not on their side. "Well," Theo said, leaning back in his chair, "we got the thing. Now what?" Jack ran a hand through his hair. "We still need to figure out what to do with it. If we hang on to it, Growler's going to come after us sooner or later. And if we try to hide it, there's no guarantee he won't find it anyway." Lyria studied the sphere, her golden eyes narrowing. "There's one place he won't dare go, the ruins of Orivis. It's a sacred site, off-limits even to Growler's forces. If we can get it there, we might be able to secure it where he can't reach it." Theo frowned. "Off-limits? And you think he'll just respect that?" "He will," Lyria said firmly. "It's not just tradition. There's something about the place that even Growlar fears. But getting there won't be easy. The journey is dangerous, and we'll need to move quickly." Jack glanced at Theo. "What do you think?" "I think I'm tired of running," Theo said. "But if this is our best shot, I'm in. Let's get this thing where it needs to go." Jack nodded. "All right, Lyria, lead the way." The three of them set out before dawn, slipping through the city's outskirts and into the rocky terrain beyond. Lyria navigated the rough path with practiced ease, while Jack and Theo followed closely, carrying their packs and keeping their eyes on the horizon. As they walked, Theo struck up a conversation. "So, Lyria, you said Growlar fears Orivis. Why's that?" She hesitated before answering. "It's difficult to explain. Orivis was once a center of Ashalan power. The energy there is unlike anything else in this sector. Some say it's still protected by whatever force the Ashalan left behind. Others think it's cursed. Either way, Growlers never dared to enter it." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And you've been there before?" "Once," Lyria admitted. "Years ago. It's not a place you visit lightly." Theo sighed. "Sounds like a great vacation spot." Jack chuckled. "Don't worry, Theo. I'm sure we'll have a blast." The terrain grew more challenging as they ascended into the mountains. The air thinned, and the temperature dropped, forcing them to wrap their jackets tighter. Despite the cold, they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that each step brought them closer to their goal. When they finally reached Orivis, the sight stopped them in their tracks. The ruins stretched out before them, massive stone structures rising from the ground like the ribs of some ancient beast. The air shimmered faintly, as if the entire area was bathed in a subtle, otherworldly energy. "This is it," Lyria said quietly. "We're here." Jack stepped forward, his eyes scanning the ruins. "Where do we put the sphere?" Lyria pointed to a massive stone pedestal at the center of the site. "There. The energy field around it will keep the sphere safe." As they approached, the ground beneath their feet seemed to hum, and the air grew heavier. Theo shifted uncomfortably. "I don't like this. Feels wrong." "It's not wrong," Lyria said. "It's ancient. The Ashalan left this place as a sanctuary. We're doing the right thing." Jack reached the pedestal and carefully placed the sphere onto its surface. The glow intensified, and the air seemed to vibrate, as if the ruins were waking up after centuries of slumber. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the energy field snapped into place. A dome of light surrounded the pedestal, crackling softly. Jack stepped back, shielding his eyes. When the light stabilized, the sphere sat untouched within the barrier, pulsing gently. "It's done," Lyria said, her voice steady. "The sphere is safe." Theo let out a long breath. "And now we leave it here," Lyria said. "No one, not even Growlar, will risk entering Orivis. We've kept it out of his reach." Jack turned to her, a small smile on his face. "You were right about this place." Lyria met his gaze. "I had my doubts, but seeing it again, I believe it was the right choice." Theo shifted his pack on his shoulders. "I still don't like it, but if it means we're not running for our lives anymore, I'll take it." Jack clapped him on the back. "Come on, Theo. Let's get out of here. I think we've had enough ancient ruins for one lifetime. As they left the ruins behind, the tension that had weighed on them for so long began to lift. The journey back down the mountain was still challenging, but for the first time, they could talk and laugh without the constant fear of pursuit. They shared stories of the past few days, Theo's sarcastic commentary, Jack's quick thinking, and Lyria's unwavering determination. For a while, it almost felt normal. When they finally returned to the edge of the city, the three of them paused to catch their breath. Lyria glanced at Jack and Theo, her expression softening. "Thank you. I couldn't have done this alone." Jack smiled. "We make a good team." Theo rolled his eyes. "Sure, a great team. Just don't ask me to do this again." Lyria laughed softly, and even Theo couldn't help but smile. As they walked back into the city's glow, their bond felt stronger than ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they could face them together.